We can't start.
Yeah, well, we really can't start because we can't
Oh.
hold our meetings unless they're open to the public.
But it looks like it might be live now.
Looks
The
like
top of
it.
my screen says live.
You're right, Hillary. It is saying that.
Wait to Patty to come back and tell us.
Well, I hope they don't cancel because they canceled my last night's meeting on the school board. So
Yeah, what's up with that, man? Are you trying to hide your budget again?
no,
Huh?
it's
You're gonna-
online.
$700,000 are gonna show up again miraculously after the city budget is passed?
If we do it
Okay,
right.
folks, we are live now, streaming on YouTube with my
Okay, fine.
apologies.
We're not gonna talk about it now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Patty. Thank you.
Yep, sorry about that.
No problem. All right, we're back in business. So as I was saying, what I'll do is 2 rounds of discussion. Keep the second round short or waive it if you'd like, but that's your personal choice. And I'm going to go in reverse alphabetical order. And if you have, I was thinking with the hand thing, raising your hand on this program, I suppose if you, if after both rounds of questions or excuse me, discussion, if you have like a question on like clarifying something or, basically a question rather than a third round of discussion that you didn't think to ask in the first 2 rounds of discussion, just put your hand up and I'll call on you. But otherwise, I'm just going to go basically in order. So let's get started. First thing on the agenda is the approval of the meetings, minutes from last meeting. So because we know we're going to have a motion obviously on this to approve, I'll go around and see if anybody has any revisions that they would like to see. So starting with Kathy, you wrote them. I'm probably sure you would have picked it up if you had any revisions, but is there anything that you would change?
No, as is.
All right, Julian, anything on the minutes?
As is.
All right, Tom, anything on the minutes?
No.
Ron, how about you? Anything on the minutes?
Yes, in order to have more transparency, although this commission probably has more transparency than any other charter commission that we've ever had due to Zoom, I've noticed that the last couple of minutes and agenda have not been put on the city's website. Could we do this? Maybe Patty can do this because I know she does it for the council meetings.
All right, so noted. We can make sure that happens.
Yes,
offline.
once they're approved, I'll get them on the website. My apologies.
All right. Anything else, Ron, or was that it?
No, as far as the content of the minutes, they look okay to me.
Okay. I am next, and I would say that just on the last, the very last motion, page 3, where it was actually my motion, I think, we had talked about basically listing in the minutes the dissenters who voted against the motion. And I, personally, I'm indifferent, but we should try to be consistent if we're going to, follow what we voted on several meetings ago. But that's the only thing that I would say. Hillary, anything on the minutes?
Yes, one thing on the second page. So our subgroup was asked to look at sort of powers during an emergency or a crisis. And I wasn't sure if part of what we have here was part of what we had discussed as a subgroup and not necessarily what we had discussed in our actual charter commission meeting. So I need some help there. I thought we were just asked to look at it and see how other cities, so some cities have this written into their charter. So I thought our subcommittee was asked to look at that, but not necessarily that we were charged with developing it. Does that sound right?
We had talked about a new chapter would have to be developed.
Right, but I thought that discussion you and I had outside of our meeting just as a subcommittee rather than during the charter commission, but that's where I can't remember.
We were charged with that, but there had been discussion during this meeting that probably now is not the time to be calling other towns and cities because of the crisis.
Right, and I know we had agreed upon that as a subcommittee. I just didn't remember that being part of our charter committee. So if it, but you're absolutely right. So for everyone, I think that during our commission meeting last, we were asked to look at it, and then our subcommittee had some exchanges, and we as a subcommittee made a determination. We can get to that, but I just wasn't, if we're talking about minutes for the actual commission meeting, we didn't have that discussion during the commission meeting.
Okay. Rian, you're up next.
Yes, I have on page 2, where it says, right in the middle where it says discussion was had to unify all language. That was an actual vote. The final motion was made by Julian. It was seconded by Sam, and the vote was 10-0. And there's also 2 articles and sections missing from the minutes. Article 2, Section 2, and then Article 8.
Okay. Samantha, you are up next.
I don't have anything else to add.
Okay. Ludi, anything on the minutes?
I have nothing to add.
All right. Phil, anything on the minutes?
Nope.
All right. I'll make a motion then to approve the minutes subject to what we just discussed.
So move.
All right. So it sounds like Phil seconded. So let's take a quick roll call vote and just make sure you answer out loud, obviously. Kathy,
Yes,
Julian,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes,
James is a yes. Hillary,
Yes,
Rianne,
Yes.
Samantha,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
Phil.
Yes.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so moving on to consider the language, the final language for what we voted on last time. And I think it'll be a lot less cumbersome if I just at this point turn it over to Rian to go over what he prepared to just sort of explain it, and then we'll take a quick vote on it, assuming that there's not a whole lot of discussion. So, Rian, will you just walk us through what you prepared?
Yes, and in fact, I think you guys can see them.
Go. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so the first one, RN 96, is this was Patty's suggestion to change, just calling out that recalls follow different rules. Do you want me to go over all of them and then vote on them one by one, or do you want to do this one at a time, James?
Let's, I was thinking we'd vote on them as a block all at once. So, so I think you can just go through them. And then if people have questions, I'll do a round of, does anybody have any questions? And then if not, we'll have a vote.
Okay. In that case, RN 97 is also Patty's clarification suggestion. And then all of the following, RN 40 and down, have to deal with the induction language. RN 40 creates a new section 13 that, is literally just a standardized, here's how regular elections and then here's how special elections work with induction. RN 94 applies that to the mayor. RN 18 applies that to the city council. RN 41 applies that to the school board. RN 42 is in elections. And then RN 43.1 is also under elections. And this was our original RN 43 where we had voted to clarify the language. And so this RN 43-1 replaces RN 43.
Brianna, can't see the other ones below 94. I don't know, maybe that's just
Wait, sorry.
on the screen.
Yeah.
We can only see RN 96, 97, RN 40, and part of RN 94. Were you?
Oh, hold on. Pretty sure my screen froze.
I was able to see all of it, so I don't know.
I could see it all as well.
Oh,
I could also.
Okay.
I just reshared, Phil. So if you can't see it, it's
I see
probably
it.
yours.
Before it wasn't.
All right, so Rian, anything else to add?
Nope.
Okay. All right, so let's see if anybody has any other questions for Rian or in general, or any discussion. Kathy,
No.
right. Julian,
Nope.
Tom,
No.
Ron,
No questions.
myself, no questions. Hillary,
No questions.
Rian, anything to add?
Nope.
All right. Samantha,
Nope.
Ludi?
Nope.
Phil?
No.
So at this point, I'll make a motion to approve the final language as written in this document prepared by Rian.
I'll second.
All right, so Kathy,
Yes.
Julian,
Yes.
and this is obviously all in favor. I should have said that in first. Tom,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
myself, James is a yes. Hillary,
Yes.
Rian,
Yes.
Samantha,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
Phil.
Yes.
Excellent. So next thing on the agenda is basically jumping into consideration of any motions for charter revisions. We ended last time on the very last section of Article 2, the mayor portion of the charter. Phil has one more motion that he has proposed. And so Phil, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask you to sort of explain. Appreciate you sending that out ahead of time. But I'll ask you to just sort of explain your motion and then we'll go around for discussion. So Phil, go for it.
Yeah, so the motion that I proposed was basically, to try to draft some language that would be more inclusive of, all protected classes, right? Because I know last time the place that we kind of got stuck on was because, some felt like, not everybody was represented in the language that was proposed. So this language here basically kind of, stipulates that we as that the mayor, right, when making appointments for board and commission, should have boards and commission that are reflective, of the diversity of the community, and also that the decision made to basically put those commissions together does not prohibit, an individual from being included because they belong to any of the protected classes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Phil. All right, so first round of discussion. Kathy, would you like to add anything?
Yes. I mean, I appreciate Phil putting this together, but all of those areas that he has outlined is already protected by federal statute. So it is not necessary to be outlining, outlining the entire, sorry, I'm looking for it. The entire paragraph that he put.
Thank you, Kathy. Julian?
Yes, well, firstly, everything that Phil's proposed is either already falling under state or federal law. So we really don't need to put that into the city charter, the same way we don't need to add that you can't go and shoot your neighbor. I mean, that stuff's all protected at a higher level. We've also referred to in the charter before as per state or as per current stature. So even if we did adopt all of these, if the state then turned around and added more protections, we would be out of compliance with what the state, between our charter and what the state had now recommended. And on a separate note, I think certainly in our city, I'm not really sure we need that because, Phil, you're a perfect testimony that you've been appointed to so many different committees. There was an election in Ward 2, and it was actually the Caucasian that got the least votes. It was two people of color that really, had the highest votes in that ward. And I think, again, Phil, you were appointed Shining Star, of the year for the city. So I'm not saying the city might not change to be not quite as inclusive, but I really think the path that Waterville has had is really shown to be inclusive and equal. And again, really, it's more concern about all of these things are already protected, and we don't want to overburden our charter with language that is covered in other aspects. Thank you.
Thanks, Julian. Tom, anything to add?
Yeah, just briefly, the idea and the sentiment that Phil is putting out here, I think, is to be lauded. And at the same time, I think one of the things that we as a commission have been trying to do is we have gone through the charter on multiple occasions to do one of two things. It's either to make all sections of the charter consistent with one another or eliminate redundancies. We've done that, I think, on a number of occasions. This language would be redundant, and I think that's worth pointing out.
All right, thank you. Ron, your turn.
Yes, I think Phil's point is well taken, but I think if we can go back to the last meeting that we had, I don't even know whether he'd be bringing this up this evening had we not had the one on gender neutral. And then I spoke up about AIDS and went on, and then Phil wanted it all. But again, Phil can speak for himself. But I did some research, and I think we've come a long ways. Back in 1979, the Charter Commission, 7 males, they were probably middle-aged more. One was John Thomas Jr., his father founded Thomas College, and they're all Caucasian, 7 out of 7, and the 2 that were appointed, one was female. Then I'm looking at the 2019, 2020, we have 6 male, 4 female. Age group is from 20 to 75, and we have 3 different races. So I think we're showing progress over the years. And I really don't think that we have to find a solution when there really is no problem here. Volunteers, non-paying positions we're talking about. I know that I've talked to Patty, my wife tried to get on the library board, and Patty says, I'm so happy to hear that you want to get on. You're a former high school English teacher. You have all the credentials that we want. And she says, you wouldn't believe how hard it is for us to get applicants. So I really don't think we're slighting anybody. And I think as the years go on, we're getting better and better as far as being fair on this point.
Thanks, Ron. I'm next. I made that motion regarding appointments to boards and commissions being gender balanced when possible last week. And I think that Phil's motion is in that same spirit. I also think that a lot of the good points that were made on that motion last week were done by people other than myself. So I'm going to yield and let other people speak. Next, Hillary.
Hi. So a point of clarification. I don't think what Phil's proposing is a question of whether any particular minority group is protected. So there's no redundancy in state language because that's not what this amendment would do. Am I understanding that correct? James, can you speak to that? I just want to make sure I understand it correctly before I.
Yeah, so say that again if you don't mind.
Yeah, so a couple of people had said that this is redundant because it reflects that these are groups that are already protected under the state. His amendment isn't about protecting minority groups. His amendment is about the makeup of these boards and commissions reflecting the diverse nature of our community. So I just want to clarify that that's not the intention of what he's trying to do. It's not a matter of protecting any minority group, right?
That's my understanding. That's my reading of the motion and based on what Phil had said.
Okay, so numbers and statistics are funny. You can take isolated groups and you can look at our commission and say, look at our commission and this is where we are. Or you can look at the bigger group and look at what the bigger group suggests. So I had Patty send me the most current list of committees and boards right now for Waterville. And I just broke it down into gender. Let me see if I can share my screen. Share. I don't know if I can share this with you. Can you see that?
No. No.
Okay, hang on just a second. Basic. Open system preferences, security and privacy. Give me one second. Maybe you should, would it be okay if you move on and come back to me so I can see if I can figure out how to share this?
Yes, definitely. Next is Rian.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I mean, I supported the amendment last week, and I did say I would be open to supporting an amendment that included more people. One thing that I think Phil's amendment does that James, yours didn't, is this doesn't actually mandate anything. So it's not saying, oh, boards and commissions must be, but I think it does a good job in terms of it not mandating. I think it does a good job of leaving the door open for minorities to have a controlled, safe environment to ask why they were not chosen, and have the mayor and the council defend their choices. I'd be interested to see Hillary's graphic once. Oh, look at that. There's Hillary's graphic. But before we jump back to Hillary, I would, going to Julian's point about, hey, this would be outside of state statute. No, it wouldn't. I will clean up the language to reference Title V, Chapter 337, which then means if the state decides to update that section of the MRSA of the law, we'd just be covered under that in the same way that the charter points now. We've been doing a lot of, as Tom said, this language cleanup where we've been cleaning up the language to point to relevant state statutes instead of explicitly spelling out language. But I'll hand it back over to Hillary.
Okay, can you hear me and see what's going on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just broke it down into current positions that are filled. I excluded vacated positions because there are a few vacant positions. So currently, according to the information that Patty sent me, we have 151 people serving in different capacities. So I want to be clear that in this grouping, we also have people who are elected. So it's not just people who were appointed. And the point that I was trying to make at our last meeting is that if we look at how we choose to govern our city and how we make those decisions, it's important for the people who serve to reflect the makeup of our city. And so that's a combination of things. That's a combination of age, socioeconomic background, it can be race, and it can be gender. And so I think what we discussed last time was just gender. So that's why I split it up, because that was easy for me to do. What I just want to draw your attention to is there may be a perception that women are serving equally. The numbers suggest something very different. So 74% of leadership positions in Waterville are filled by men. If we were to break it down into minorities, I think we'd see that it's actually a teeny tiny percentage of the whole. So you can mention Phil specifically, and I think your point is very well made. He's great. We're really lucky to have him. But just because we have one doesn't mean that we stop. And so I think the spirit of what Phil's amendment was designed to do was, as I think Rhiannon just said, it's absolutely not mandate anything. It's just to give a reminder that maybe this is something we should consider in the back of our heads. I think that the airport advisory committee might have 5 openings this year. If there are 5 openings this year, maybe consider having some women on it. Maybe consider having some minorities if they apply, and if they don't, they don't. But the language would then allow a discussion, a point of departure, and I think that's really what it's intended to do. And so I'd like to suggest that it's not a matter of forcing anyone's hand. It's a matter of saying, when we look at the numbers, I don't know that it reflects really who we are, and that representation matters. And sometimes you have to put effort to make that happen.
Thank you, Hillary. Samantha?
I think Hillary did a really great job, and thank you for that graphic, and I don't have anything else to add.
Ludi?
I would echo that. I really appreciate what Hillary had to say in her graphic.
Thank you. Phil, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, again, the spirit of the amendment that I proposed was really to make sure that the voice of everyone is represented, right? And I know I incorporated some of the federal language into the amendment, but if you read the first part of the amendment, it basically speaks to having groups that are diverse, like our community, right? And also expands into the federal language. I mean, I don't think that it would be an issue to have something that kind of reminds us that, this is what we aspire to be, right? As a community. I don't think that would be a problem to have that reminder there that says to somebody, hey, because sometimes we are forgetful, right? We forget things and we just keep with the motion and we just keep doing the same thing over and over again. And I think that having language that kind of gives us that reminder and suggests and let us know that, hey, we have to make that conscious effort to be able to, to enact the change that we are looking to see, right? And make those choices that are representative of everybody. And that's why the language is drafted not to be something that makes anything mandatory to anybody, but makes it, that kind of reminder that's always there in the back of our heads and say, hey, while we're working towards this goal, this is what we aspire our boards and commission to look like.
Thank you, Phil. All right, second round of discussion, what I like to call the lightning round. So Kathy, anything you'd like to add?
Well, yes, a couple of things. I mean, if I were the mayor or the chair of whatever board or commission, I would want to have the most qualified people on there. An example was brought up about Pam Merrill. Pam Merrill is an educator. For her to apply to the library board, that is wonderful. That makes sense. So I should be able to appoint that type of person for the library. The same with Phil. I'm not picking on you, but if you remember when Ward 2 was open, there were 5 people that applied for that opening. They chose the most qualified at that time, and that happened to be you. So I think we're just making a big to-do out of something that really doesn't exist in our city. And I guess my other question would be, with all of these boards, how many women did apply for them? That would be the other factor to look at. If you don't apply, you can't be considered. And many times that's what happens. So I think the language we have right now is fine.
Julian?
Yeah, Kathy echoed what I thought. According to the mayor, he has had a lot of people even applying for these boards. So what that chart is telling me is the women just have not bothered to apply. Otherwise, the numbers would be different. But also, if it's not a mandated language, then it's in there for show. It's not enforceable. The city lawyer can't enforce it. And, I've heard from a lot of residents feeling there's an elitist aspect to boards where the high income of certain institutions dominate boards, Colby being an example. And I've seen that with a lot of boards. So if we really want to get equal and represent the community, maybe we should be saying that, I'll propose a motion for debate next week, since we're throwing everything out there. And it doesn't have to be Colby per se, but any organization should not dominate more than X% of a board. That just makes good sense. Then you don't have 6 Colby people on a library board or any board. And sometimes that's a good old boys club picking who's related, who the city manager went to Colby. And that doesn't reflect the average person in the street either. So I'm kind of against picking on any, giving special treatment to anything, but that could definitely be a consideration. How about veterans? Maybe we need to have X amount of veterans on boards. And, to Rian's point, if a charter can simply point to any updates with the state law changing, deferring back to the charter, well, that's the prime example. We don't need this in the first place, because every single thing that is mandated federally or statewide already overrides our charter if it's a law, civil rights law, or a law like that. So I'm completely opposed to this. Thank you.
Tom?
No, everything else. Thanks.
Ron?
Yes, I have to repeat what Julian did say. Basically, if it goes in, I do think it's just going to be there for show. I really don't want to tie the mayor's hands. I want him to find the best qualified for these different boards and commissions that we do have. And basically, I guess that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Ron. I'm next, and I'll just say that I'm in favor of the motion. The concept of the motion, I would have to wait to see the final language, because I think it could be set up a little bit more clear, but I'm in favor of the concept. Hillary?
So I want to add 2 things. Very few of these boards or committees have any prerequisite qualifications. So unless the city decides to write out qualifications or prerequisites to serve on these commissions, the basic requisite is that you live in Waterville. So Kathy, I'm not disputing that we want the best people to serve on them. What I'm saying is that we don't have a requirement of any qualifications. So unless you put that in writing, your only requisite is that you live in Waterville. If we want to say, though, that basically the best people have been appointed and that it's working as is, then I would argue that the numbers suggest that 76% of the people who serve are men, and that sends a message to me that men are just more qualified than women, and I don't believe that that's to be true. And the last thing I'll say, and Tom, you had sort of brought up this point of whether this is enforceable or not, and maybe Julian suggested, you know, is there any point at all? So very briefly, I used to teach, and we would have observations, and I had a department chair come and observe me, and my department chair wrote down how many times I called on girls or boys, how many times I might have called on who seemed to be the good students in the class versus the ones who were struggling. And we had a conversation about it afterwards. And it's something that I had never really considered consciously. Was I calling on people differently? And it turned out I wasn't. So that made me feel good. And it wasn't a requirement. It wasn't something I was told in advance. And it wasn't told that in the future I should watch out for it. But there's no question that having that discussion changed how I approached my classroom. It made me think about, when I went to call on someone, was I trying to be fair and equitable? And that did matter. So I think I don't want us to have to wait for the state to mandate something like this. I want to say that the makeup of our city matters. How we govern is often reflected by who serves on these commissions and these boards. And right now it's heavily, heavily weighted by white men. And the people who choose to appoint are generally white men. And the people who pass on a whole are generally white men. So you've got some women and you've got a minority on this commission telling you, we'd like to have language, not that mandates it, but understands that striving for diversity is important. And what I feel like I hear people saying is that it's not. Whether it passes or not, that disappoints me.
Rianne?
Yeah, so I just want to touch base on what Julian commented on about pointing to state statute and what I meant by that, because I think there was a little misunderstanding. What I mean is the charter routinely here points to, as referenced in or as noted in, relevant state statute, or this, even I think we're switching the language to say relevant state statute instead of pointing to the direct state statute. But that's just, we're not stripping that from the charter, even though it already exists in state law, because the charter is the governing document of the city, and it's there for clarification purposes sometimes, but also it is the governing document of the city. And kind of touching a little bit on what Hillary said in terms of, is this something we want to be mindful of? Is this something that we want to value? And I would hope, having lived here, for almost a decade now, I would hope that Waterville wants to be a city that includes everyone, and codifying into our charter that we are a city that strives for that is not a bad thing. There's been talk of enforcement here. And I disagree with the fact that it's not enforceable. I think this is a question really for Bill Lee to say, hey, if somebody filed a lawsuit against the city alleging that they were not made a member of this committee for X reason, is this something you could defend the city on? Um, but that's not the intent of this, is not for people to create lawsuits. You know, the intent of this is to state our values, what we want as a city, and to create a safe place for minorities to have a say in the city, even if the say that they're having is to question why they weren't deemed qualified enough to sit on a board. I think that check and balance is really important. I think opening that door and carving out a space to say, hey, we welcome you asking the question of how these appointments were made is the only way that you see change happen. And I know this because I've experienced it. I'm sure there's several other people on this commission who could say the same thing in terms of what they have experienced, either because of their gender or because they are a minority class. But really the only way is for the people in power to carve out space. And so for the people who are on the fence about this, or who know that they're going to vote against this, I guess I would say is the reason that you're going to vote against this because of the fact that you are a white person in a predominantly white city and you consider yourself qualified for these positions by default of that status. That's all.
Samantha?
I mean, I think that I spoke my mind in the last meeting, and I just echo what Hillary and Rian have said, and I really don't have anything else to add.
Ludi?
Yep, same here. I voiced my thoughts last time. I really agree with the concept of the motion, and I appreciate what Hillary and Rena have said.
Phil?
Yeah, I just want to talk to a couple of points here. So, like Rian mentioned, some of the language that's incorporated is federal statute. Suggesting that federal statute is not enforceable, I don't think so we mean to say that this particular language would not be enforceable at the federal level? It is enforceable at the federal level, if such issue were to come about. So that's why, it was put in there, because that is statute that actually can be enforced all the way at the federal level or the state level, right? And the second point is the way I've drafted the language again is to make sure that everybody is included. Being a minority, I understand the point that about the last proposal that was made to make sure that women have a voice, right? Because I understand, because I live it, okay? I still live it today, right? This struggle of being a minority and living in a country, where sometimes, that has a negative effect on things that you're trying to accomplish as an individual. And making sure that we have something in writing in our charter that includes everybody. I don't understand how we can say, oh, we don't want that, right? Because this does not mandate anything, right? It doesn't tie the hands of the mayor, right? It doesn't say the mayor must appoint one person from any protected class, right? It doesn't say that. It doesn't say if the mayor doesn't do this, appoints somebody who's from a specific class, the mayor will be in trouble. It says that we want the makeup of those board and commission to reflect the diversity of our community, right? And also it also reinforces something that we hope that everybody on this commission would be in favor of, which is having all classes protected, right? Not having preferential treatment for anybody, right? And simply putting that in writing, I don't understand how we can say, oh, we don't want to just reinforce something that is there because we say, oh, it's not enforceable, even though it is, because that is something that is enforceable at the federal level, right? And being inclusive of everybody, I would being a minority, the point that Rian made is true, right? If you're not a minority, you will not understand. Okay, you could understand at some level, but you don't get to live the life of a woman or an African American or an Arab or an older person. You don't get to live those lives. You can shape your experience on your own understanding of what you believe that it is. But I can assure you that whatever you believe that it is different than what somebody who has to deal with lives. And making sure that we put that in writing so that we can remind ourselves what we're trying to accomplish and what the kind of community that we want to be is very important. And that is the spirit as to why this particular amendment was drafted.
Thank you, Phil. All right, so real quick, Kathy, you've got your hand up.
Right, I didn't want to interrupt with Hillary, but my question is, from that information, Hillary, that you received, did you also receive the data of, let's pick on the library. How many people applied for that? How many women, how many men, how many whatever? Because that data would be very important to know also to give us the entire picture. So that was my only question about that.
Right, and your point is really, really well made. The answer is no. That's the short answer. The longer answer is there's data on this kind of thing all over the place that suggests when you don't see that representation, you often won't apply because you think you'll never be considered. That's why this kind of language is important, because it lets you know you would be considered. So
I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. Go ahead.
Like the airport. I would not apply for the airport. I don't have any experience and technical knowledge for that.
Right, but I don't think, again, we don't have those requirements written. The only requirement to serve on that airport advisory committee is to live in Waterville. So until we decide that we need to start writing requirements, the only requirement we have is that you live here. So,
Which I do agree with you that there should be a more detailed description.
Right.
But my point is, I would never apply for the airport.
Right, but I'm saying when you look at the makeup and not just the airport of everything, if you're a minority, if you're a woman, the makeup suggests you won't be considered equally. That's all.
All right, so thank you very much for the discussion. We have a motion. It was seconded. We had our discussion, so let's move to a roll call vote. If you're in favor of the motion, say yes. If you're opposed to the motion, say no. I will go right down the list. Kathy.
No.
Julian.
No.
Tom.
No.
Ron.
Oh,
Could you repeat that, Ron?
no.
Thank you. James is a yes. Hillary.
Yes.
Rian.
Yes.
Samantha.
Yes.
Ludi.
Yes.
Phil.
Yes.
All right, so the vote is 6-4, so that doesn't meet the threshold of 7-3 to be put onto the charter.
James, can I just add before we go on really quickly that addressing Hillary's comment, that she's disappointed about even having this discussion.
Well, let's actually just move on because we already had the discussion, we already had the vote. So I'm happy for you to talk with her offline, but let's move this thing along.
Yep.
So, all right. So that finishes up Article 2, the mayor portion of the charter. So moving on to Article 3, which is the city manager. Excuse me. Does anybody have any motions to make any revisions to Article 3?
James, this is Patty. Could I back up for just one moment?
Sure.
Getting back to Article 2, I had sent out, we incorporated the changes that I suggested through the vote earlier tonight, but in section 5 D of the mayor's powers and duties, I highlighted a section about where veto is prohibited in the middle of section D. And I just have a hope or a suggestion that maybe similar to what we did with the consolidating the language for the induction, that maybe we could somewhere, and I'm not sure if it's here or if it's a new section in Article 2, but kind of highlight or consolidate what's vetoable and what isn't, because it really ends up being kind of a hunt and peck through the whole charter to figure out whether something can be vetoed or not. Because there are certain things that can't be. So I'm not sure.
Patty,
Yeah.
Patty, I was actually going to bring this up under section 4, under the council and the votes that they can take. Do you think that it belongs under the mayor, or does it belong under the council to list off the actions that they can take that are not subject to a veto?
I really don't know where it should be. I would like it to just be somewhere where it's a little more clear and concise. So I'm happy to leave that up to the group, but I just wanted to bring it up before we plotted past this, just to bring it up as an item.
So Patty, you're saying, basically articulating where a veto, where in the charter a veto is actually prohibited. It's referenced in that section 5 of Article 2, section 5D.
Yeah.
But you're saying that it should be clarified to sort of list where exactly in the
Yeah.
charter a veto.
What is prohibited to be vetoed? I'm not clear on that. You have to look through several areas of the charter to find that. So I'm just saying that either here or perhaps as Rian suggested in the section, the article with the city council, that would be fine too. But I would just like to see it more clear and concise somewhere.
Okay, let's definitely make a note of that. Maybe either Rian or Kathy or both co-secretaries can see what they can dig up in terms of where in the charter it's mentioned.
Yeah, it's mentioned in like 5 different sections, and I personally, having looked at where it's listed out, think that it belongs in Article 4. But I can come next meeting with that list and we can kind of discuss if we want to put it under the mayor or if we want to put it under city council.
Okay, that sounds good.
That works for me. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Patty. All right, so with that, we'll move on to Article 3, City Manager. Does anybody have any motions for any section of Article 3 of the charter?
Yes, I do. I have 2, actually.
All right, let's take them one at a time. State your first motion, Kathy.
My first motion would be, because as I'm looking at Article 3, I don't really see specific qualifications to become the city manager.
I thought when I read it, it said preferable financial background or business degree. At some point, it had listed it in the charter.
I would like to point out that's a point of order. That's not a motion. That's a comment.
That's correct. Kathy, I think what you're probably referring to, if you had a motion on qualifications of the city manager, that would be under section 1, obviously the first section. It's a couple sentences, no, it's 1 sentence long. But if you had a motion on either adding or removing qualifications of the city manager, that would be the section that you'd want to.
I would like to make the motion that we have the discussion about.
That's not a motion, that's a discussion.
James?
Yeah, I'm listening.
I would like to make the motion that under Article 3, Section 1, that a more defined qualification be listed here, including education, previous city manager experience, because right now we do not have that.
The point of order,
Okay,
that's not a.
Yeah, so Yeah, thanks, Phil. So what would be your motion? What specifically would you add for qualifications that the city manager should have?
The qualifications should be the appropriate business administrative degree, and that at least 5 years of city manager experience.
Okay, so let me just make sure that I understand that correctly. So your motion would be to add qualifications, one being that the city manager must have 5 years, at least 5 years experience in city management,
Correct.
as well as a 4-year degree in what did you say?
Business administration or public and business administration, preferably a master's. But preferably is the question, or the highlight, James.
Okay. So your motion would be to add qualifications to the city manager that they have a 4-year degree in administration or business administration, as well as, or excuse me, preferably a master's in that subject area. And second, that the person, city manager, has to have had at least 5 years of experience in city management.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So that's the motion that's on the table. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it for discussion, Julian.
Okay, Julian seconded it. So let's start our first round of discussion. Kathy, you're actually first. Go ahead.
Okay, I feel like I just said, what we have right now, James, under Article 3, Section 1, it needs to be more defined. We need the qualification that the person applying, whoever, has managed a city before and also has the education to back that up.
Thank you. Julian?
Yeah, I agree partially. I think that a combined degree that has business and finance, double major maybe, is very important and very relevant to a city. I do agree with the past experience. I'm just not sure if it has to be 5 years because you might not always get that. But I think at least even if it was 2 years, they would presumably come with some reference. But I definitely think some kind of business administration and finance should be a minimum when you're handling a budget of $25 million and overseeing numerous departments from fire to police and the school system. But correct me if I'm wrong, somewhere under the city manager, I thought I saw language that stated should possibly or should have business or finance or past experience preferable.
So Julian, I'll jump in. So it does say, so section 1, which the subheading is appointment of city manager, semicolon, qualifications. It says, for people who don't have it in front of them, it says the city manager shall be chosen as provided in Article 5, Section 9, for a term not to exceed 5 years on the basis of character, executive and administrative qualifications, experience, and technical knowledge of municipal management. And then the other part of it just says that the city manager shall, during the tenure of office, reside within the city.
So it does have some language about past municipal. Yeah, but the thing is, if we get too restrictive and no one applies, what do you do then? You rewrite the charter. But I do definitely agree with some past city experience and finance and business at some point, and the moral character.
Thank you. Tom?
So I like the sentiment. I like the idea of, trying to create a situation where we're putting forth, a particularly qualified individual, especially for a job that's as important as the city manager. At the same time, I'd hate to preclude somebody from having the opportunity to take that job just because they haven't been a city manager someplace else. I mean, the reality is that you could have absolutely done just a horrible job in a place, somewhere else in the state of Maine or somewhere else in the country, and then that would automatically make you more qualified than somebody who would be a rookie city manager, but is particularly talented and would maybe probably do a terrific job. So for those reasons, I don't know that I'd be inclined to require an experience as a city manager. I don't know that I would want that as a requirement.
Thank you. Ron.
Yeah, I'm reading that section 1, and again, as you do state, it does say administrative qualifications and experience, and I would assume that our search committee would certainly find somebody that did have administrative qualifications. If not, I'm sure that they'd be hearing about it. If they, quote, just put in a friend of a good old boy, I don't think this would happen. I think the language is there, but I certainly understand what Kathy is saying, that we certainly want somebody well qualified for the job. And I'm going to say this is implied in that section 1 that we would get the best candidate.
Thanks, Ron. I'm next. Basically, I'll just say that, I do agree that, the city manager can't just be some person off the street with no experience, either in business management or municipal management. But I think that the way that it is, the charter is worded right now, does a decent job at basically requiring that there are some experience and qualifications that are necessary. And also at the end of the day, city council has to vote on this. And so, hopefully we trust our city councils enough to pick the right person, and hopefully they do so on those bases. So I do understand the purpose of the motion. I just think it's more or less already in there. Hillary.
So I'm actually inclined to agree with the sentiment of what Kathy is trying to get at. Actually, I think I think the way maybe, Kathy, to do this is to put preferred qualifications. So Tom's point is we might not get anyone who's had this exactly, and we might get someone who's better. Or let's throw out the possibility, I bet Patty could do this job right now, right? Like, she's been here forever. She might be able to do it. You might not have that exact background, but you could have a preferred background with applicants. So I'm kind of wondering if this is the something that might be worthwhile looking at language of other charters. I like it. I just like to get it right in a way that makes sense. I hear what you're saying, James, but I think the language could be more specific. Executive and administrative qualifications. What does that really mean? Let's be clear about what we want. Basis of character. You know what, Julian, I'm with you. I want someone moral character, but I really don't know how to put that on paper, and for you, how to prove that on paper.
I agree.
So I'm actually, I want it, but I actually don't know that it should be in here. And in terms of, we have experience and technical knowledge of municipal management. So Kathy, I think that's where we say preferred, and preferred experience of so many years. But there's a really good point to make that somebody might have a background that looks just great, but if they don't have it exactly the way we want it, then we eliminate them. But I think we should set the qualifications. I think they should be clearer. I'm just not sure how to do it right this minute. So I'd love to put our subcommittee on it and see if we could just do some looking. But maybe that's what, I don't know, maybe help me out, folks, is we vote on making it clearer and then come up with language for the next time. If that's the case, yes, I can't vote for it as is a max, say 5 years experience and so on. But Kathy, I'm definitely with you on let's make it clear and so that there's no question we should have some qualifications and they should be on paper.
James?
Yeah, sorry about that. Thanks, Hillary. Hillary just went Rhiannon.
Yeah, I agree with this motion. Not exactly how it's been stated. I would insert a clause that says or relevant experience. You know, if somebody has 4 years of experience and we've codified into our charter that means they need to have 5, then all of a sudden we don't have them. But I do think it's very important, given the fact that our city manager has quite a lot of authority, and we really have a figurehead mayor. I do think it's important to make sure that we do have somebody who has experience managing a city. And this isn't, you know, the same thing as managing something small. I think, you know, Julian, you pointed out that like the city budget is 25 million, you know, whatever the school budget is, you know, they don't really manage the school budget, but like we're not talking an inconsequential amount of money for Waterville. And so I like the concept. Again, I would just add a clause of or relevant experience just to really kind of make sure that we're not going to lose somebody who would be really great for the city who, you know, doesn't have a degree in, you know, business administration. Maybe they have a poli-sci degree or something, but they have managed a city. And would be really good for Waterville and understand how a city like Waterville operates. And then I do want to say, I'm just going to do this because I can, since we're on Zoom. My dad is watching all the way from Maryland. So I just want to say, hey, Dad, thanks for tuning in and watching how the local government works.
Right, Samantha.
I would echo what Rhiannon said. I appreciate the sentiment. I don't know if we should be as specific to say something like a 5-year term. I think that might get us into a situation where we're unable to hire someone that might be qualified. And I don't always know that experience and a finite amount of experience makes you qualified for a job necessarily. I don't know if we could instead have some sort of language having qualifications that are set by the city council or something of the like. But I would just caution us to be to not be too incredibly specific, because I think that could cause more problems and not get to what we're trying to accomplish here. But I would agree. I mean, the city manager is responsible for a large city budget, a lot of departments. I will say that while we've been having this discussion, look through both Augusta and Hollowell's charters, and neither one sets specific requirements. And those are cities of very similar size and local. So I'm not sure how other cities are doing that. Those were the two that I had time to look at, but it's just something to keep in mind.
Thank you. Ludi?
I support and also appreciate the sentiment, and I liked what Rian said about adding the clause about or relevant experience. And I appreciate everything that Sam has said. So I think that, yeah, I'm in favor of the idea. It's just the language. We'll just see how the language goes further down the line.
Phil?
Yeah, and I can appreciate the sentiment of what being proposed. But like many, I could come to the table and I can have $25 million and not have a college degree. Does that make me not qualified to be a city manager? Or I could be a nuclear physicist and not have a business degree. Does that make me not qualified to be a city manager? And I think that the way that the language is currently written, it leaves it broad enough so that when the search party goes out to look for a city manager, they have some guidelines that they're going by in terms of what they're going to be looking at. And I think that if we start to become more specific, we are just restricting ourselves into a certain type of candidate, right? Who might not have the experience, but has, the education to be able to have to do the job. Who might not have as much experience, has a little bit of experience, Again, we restricting ourselves to, to some really specific point. I believe it's not gonna be the most beneficial thing that we can do and help the city select a city manager.
Thank you, Phil. So we've had our first round of discussion. Let's have our lightning second round. Kathy?
Well, I brought a focus onto this because when you read what we have right now, if you've had experience in, I'm trying to think of an organization, some organization, James, the way it reads right now, I would be qualified to apply for this job. It doesn't tell me that I have to have had city management experience or anything. It's too wide open. I feel like, and I do agree with what Hillary said, and Rian, you're in charge of a city. There needs to be specific qualifications. I do like what Hillary had suggested, that maybe our committee review some job descriptions, because that's where you're really going to find more of what is expected for a city manager. So maybe we should, Hillary, look at a few job descriptions from other cities.
Julian?
Yeah, most professional jobs usually have a good 2-page listing of what they require. I mean, you look at even a teacher's post will have very detailed requirements for that. And this is really the highest form of government in the city, because they really instruct and guide the council as well. The council only gets a lot of times what the city manager presents. So it definitely should be very specific with qualifications. A lot of times, usually people who have a finance degree and were a finance assistant for the city manager often go on to become city managers because they've been in finance, they've seen the police budget, the fire budget. So it definitely needs to be spelled out a lot more than it is. I mean, at present, I could apply. You wouldn't want me running the city, right? So, and just to address Rian's concern about the city manager not really being involved with the school budget, technically they are quite a lot, because usually they work with the superintendent, and 33% of all of our tax dollars are given to the schools. So they have joint meetings where they hash out concerns of the city and try and come up with their spending projection. So in a sense, they're also responsible for $9 million of our school money, which is 33% of the budget. And if they were feeling it was too high or low, I'm sure they'd advise the council as well. So I think the city manager does play quite a big role in the schools. At least a good one would as well, to make sure you're on the same page with your superintendent. So I'm not sure we're going to solve this problem tonight, but I think before we close the charter, it should be a lot. There should be worded a little bit better than 1.5 sentences as to qualifications. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Tom?
if we move towards, I think preferred language as something, you know, in the vein with which Hillary and Rian kind of tried to push this towards, then it is absolutely something that I would vote for. I like the idea of having a more detailed idea as to exactly who's going to be running the city, because I think that's how everybody on this board feels. I think everybody on this board feels that the city manager is, you know, is kind of your de facto leader here, and the idea that person's qualifications would be more specific and more spelled out, I think that's a really good idea.
Thank you. Ron?
Yeah, this administrative qualifications, that is vague, and I do agree that there is a chance, if there is not a large supply of applicants for the job, we might get someone that is really has the expertise for the job and administrative qualifications. I would like somebody that does have experience, but I am starting to lean that I do want someone with some type of city manager expertise by going to school and being trained for this. As we say, we're talking about an awful lot of money, and I would be swayed to have this taken up and changing the language on this section 1.
Thank you. So yeah, so I would be in favor of clarifying this, and I think that, you know, like what a couple people have suggested, and what who most recently Tom most recently said was, I do like the idea of having some preferable qualifications while not absolutely mandating any specific qualifications, simply because, you know, if you have 10 things that person has to meet to be qualified for city manager, you could get the perfect candidate that only meets 9 of those, and so you'd be excluding him or her. But I would definitely be in favor of revisiting this, and we'll continue with the second round of discussion. But my suggestion, I think, would be for Kathy, for you to withdraw this motion and kick it to the subcommittee to come up with something specific in terms of, you know, a list of qualifications, preferable or what have you, and then we could bring it up, you know, next meeting or whenever that might be looked at. Hillary?
My AirPods went out while you were talking, so I missed part of what you said. But I think the only point that I wanted to make to Phil's concern, I'd made before, Phil, if we just do use that term of preferable qualifications, then we leave room for people who may have an untraditional background that we can deem as being qualified. But the wording in the charter as it is right now is really, really vague. Julian makes an excellent point. As Rianne did too. And Kathy, it's an important position. They're dealing with a lot of money, and there's nothing wrong with making those qualifications a little bit more clear in terms of what we'd like. What we get is often what we get, and that's why if you leave preferred qualifications, then you leave yourself some room.
Thank you. Rianne?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add, except that if, you know, Kathy would entertain just adding the clause of or relevant experience, then I don't even think we need to kick this back to subcommittee C. And I think it's fine to go as long as we don't literally hamstring ourselves with an arbitrary number or an arbitrary degree, and that we're really, really focused on the experience.
Samantha?
Patty, isn't there a job description though for the city manager's position?
Yes. So sorry.
Because
Can you
I
hear me?
remember reading
Yeah.
a job description somewhere, and it is fairly extensive. We're not just saying anyone can apply for the city manager's position. it
Yeah.
was very detailed, and it was a very detailed job description as far as qualifications.
Yes,
So-
I'm sure that the Human Resource Office has all the official job descriptions for all the positions in the city. So yes, they would have that one as well.
Yeah, I can email Bobby Joe about it, but I didn't see it online. I just think that these are two different things. So there's like a job description part, and there's also our language in the charter. And I mean, I would just kind of caution you. I think Phil brought up some really great points. And it's not to say that I don't think we should have highly qualified people in these positions, because I definitely do. There's no job description in the Constitution for the president. There, you know, we don't have any other job descriptions in this charter. There's no job description for the chief of police. There's no job description for anyone. So I'm okay with being a little bit more specific, or maybe even putting language in there about a job description that must be created by the council. But I do think that this could be kind of a fluid position. In 5 years, if we're looking for another city manager, we might be looking for someone a little bit different, and we might be looking for a different set of skills. And if we are going to be putting all of those skills in this charter, then I think that that could be a mistake. For example, I've applied for jobs before where I've hired for jobs before, actually, where we had originally set out a set of skills that we were looking for a position, and then interviewed a bunch of candidates and realized none of those candidates really fit what we were looking for. And in fact, we amended the job description because we were looking for something totally different. We needed a different set of qualifications to fill that position. So I think if we are going to be putting a detailed job description in the charter, then I don't know that I would be in favor of that. I think that the city council should be making the job description, and the search committee should be making the job description, and it should be approved by them. But that's kind of just my 2 cents on that. That doesn't mean that I don't agree with making this a little bit more detailed and saying the city manager should have a specific type of degree, or even a degree, or relevant experience, or just narrowing it down a little bit more like that. But I think I would caution us to create a job description within the charter.
Thank you. Ludi.
I think that Sam brings up some really great points. So I too think that we should maybe sway away from having a job description in the charter, but I do understand the sentiment of wanting qualified people. And I do support the idea of having the or relevant experience clause. I would just caution us from adding too much language that does make it turn into a job description, but I also think that having some language in there, clarifying the position and the qualifications would be good.
Thank you. Phil.
Yeah, I just want to echo again, add to, what Sam said. I don't think that when the city sends out the job description to look for the city manager, they send out the one sentence that's in the city charter, right? They don't go and say, well, we're just going to take this sentence here, we're going to put that in the job description, and this is what we're going to be looking for a city manager. I'm sure if you read that city manager resume, which I'm pretty sure right now is circulating out there, because we have a search party for next city manager, that I'm pretty sure that resume is quite extensive, and I don't think that here is the place to kind of take that resume and that job description and put it into the city charter, because what's noted in the city charter are kind of some pointers that will point the search party towards the criterias that will be developed within the job description, so that candidates can then apply based on the resume and the fit that they see themselves that they can see themselves as when they are applying for this position. I think that we don't want to restrict ourselves in the city charter as to the type of candidate that we want to apply. I think that's the job of the the job description that is put out. And I think that if the city council deems necessary, to modify that job description, they could do that. And I think, if we want to add some more broad terms as far as, some pointers towards, what it is that we're looking for, like, make sure that, maybe Canada is not discriminated based on, again, protected classes, something like that. I don't know. But I think now is not the time to, to really restrict ourselves to a specific thing, to specific things in the city charter.
Thank you. Rian, you got your hand up?
Yeah, my question is for Kathy, if Kathy would be willing to add the clause of or relevant experience, and we could vote on the motion tonight.
Kathy?
I really like Hillary's suggestion that we go back and look at a few. Right now, it's too broad. And just putting in what Rian just said, again, it leaves the door open too much. So I would like to withdraw the motion and have Committee C look at this and bring it back to the table next time. Hillary?
So I was going to say, we could vote on the idea of what you want, saying should have an MBA and relevant experience, and we could clean up the language for next time. Would that work?
Well, relevant experience in city management?
Right, and yes, and then
Right.
if we want to be more specific with the language, we can still as a committee look at examples, and then we'll have a second vote next time. But I'm thinking it sounds like we might have several people in agreement, and I agree with Samantha. I'm not looking for a job description, but clarification of qualifications.
No, that was never the intent, Hillary, to
Right,
about the
yeah.
job description.
Right. So I'm saying, I think I mean, it's your motion, but I'm saying, I think we could vote to pass it, and then we'd still have a second vote on the language for next time. Is that right? Do I understand correctly, folks? James?
Yeah, I mean, that is the procedure. Myself, I would just say that, even though I'm okay with the concept, I just think the motion as it is right now is a little bit too sort of all over the place. I
Okay.
kind of agree with Kathy. If she wants to withdraw her
Okay.
motion and then look at it, subcommittee C, look at it, and then come back next meeting or, the following meeting, whenever people have had time to look at it.
I'm good with that.
Then it can be more sort of clear.
So we do have to motion to send it to subcommittee C.
All right. So Kathy, do you want to make that motion?
Yes, I withdraw my original motion. I make the motion that we go back to Committee C to examine the qualifications for Section 1.
I'll
Seconded.
second that.
Okay. So for the vote, if you're in favor, say yes. If you're against, say no. Kathy?
Yes.
Julian?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
James is a yes. Hillary?
Yes.
Rianne?
Yes.
Samantha?
Yes.
Ludi?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
All right, so that sounds good to me. We'll kick that to subcommittee C and come back
Okay.
to it at the next meeting or the meeting after.
James?
Yes, Julian.
I'd like to make a motion on the city manager position and
Wait, I think Kathy had two motions. She only made one. I believe she has
No,
a
that's
second
fine.
one.
That's fine. We'll move forward.
Okay.
I'd,
Yeah, so
I'd
hold
like
on
to
one
make
second. Hold on
um,
1 second, Julian. Rianne, you've still got your hand up. Are you was that something on this or is that an old hand up?
No, that was an old hand up. That was my
Okay.
question.
All right,
Okay.
sorry, go
Okay.
ahead, Julian.
After I argue this motion, it'll become quite clear as to why it's very important, but I would like to make a motion that the city manager has to be a US citizen.
What?
That the city manager has to be a US citizen. Is
All
my
right.
motion.
Okay, so there's a motion by Julian. Is there a second? All right, last time. Is there a second for that motion?
Yes, second.
Okay, so discussion. Kathy, you're first.
I definitely agree with that. Because right now, the way this stands, you do not have to be a US citizen to apply for the city manager. So it is a good clarification that we should discuss.
Julian.
Yeah, the reason I propose that is having been on a green card myself, I'm aware of some of the problems that can be caused by that. So when I was on a green card, you're prohibited for applying for certain jobs. You can't work at a veterans association. My wife couldn't work there as a nurse. I don't believe you can work for the post office, and you do have a different set of rules. So my concern, the only reason I'm proposing this, is there's two factors that could leave the city of Waterville in a real predicament with someone on a green card. Firstly, if one of you goes out and has a glass of wine and gets an OUI, it's a certain procedure. If on a green card, they can revoke your status at that point. So it could possibly leave the city without a manager. And secondly, if you're also a citizen, if you're a citizen of another country and they have a draft, or you were ex-Navy or Army, they can call you up on that day and you would have to give allegiance to Britain or Canada in my case and leave. And again, it would leave a void in the city very quickly. So those are, it's for the logistic reasons I think of that. And if you think about it, all the elected officials, you have to be a citizen. The mayor has to be a citizen. The council has to be a citizen. So pretty much the city manager, other than people running city departments, don't have to be citizens. But if it's not as major losing a police chief or a fire chief if they were called to their country of origin as it would be a city manager. And I just think before we close the charter, some thought or debate on it might be prudent. Thank you.
Tom. Tom, any comments? If you're trying to comment, you're on mute.
Sorry, James. Jeez Louise. I'm sorry about that. So here's the thing: is this? I understand the ideas that Julian brought up here, and I mean that is a concern. You know, I feel like it's probably kind of a remote concern, but I mean I could see that being an issue and throwing the city into turmoil and creating some upheaval. But I'm also of the mindset where, I mean, if we can, you know, if someone from Spain moves into our community, then they'd be a Waterville resident, I believe. I'm sure there's other people on this committee that could correct me if I'm wrong, even while they may not necessarily be a United States citizen. And if that person can come here from wherever, China, Spain, Australia, I don't care, and they can come in here and they can, you know, they can manage departments and they can whip a budget into shape, and they can, you know, they can manage the mill rate and take care of the taxpayers while at the same time making sure that everything is properly funded. Then I think that's someone we'd all be interested in having run our city. And I'd hate to have that person precluded from doing so. So I certainly understand where we're going with this, but I'm very reticent to limit who can help solve problems for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you, Ron.
Yes, I would hope we live in a city that has a competent search committee that would vet this person, and we would find out whether he is a citizen of the United States as well. I'm checking over the qualifications. You say that like the city council, you have to be a citizen of the United States. Now, I don't see that in the qualifications. Is it there?
No.
You do have to be a citizen to be on the council.
I'm looking
You
at
do
section
not.
2 and I don't see it.
At least Patty told me that.
You do
Right,
have
well,
to
look
be a
at page
citizen.
9.
You do have to be a citizen to register to vote. So you have to be a resident and a citizen to run for mayor, city council, board of ed. But the manager's position is not an elected position.
Right.
So I'm looking through state statute to see if there's any qualification requirements for citizenship. Because I know there are for a clerk. You have to be a resident of Maine, a citizen, a U.S. citizen and a resident of Maine. So I'm looking while you're chatting, I'm looking it up to see if I can find anything.
And James, just while Patty's looking it up, really, it's not a sort I'm prepared to. I don't really have strong opinions either way, but I thought it would be good to consider that before we close the charter.
Okay, thank you. All right, and Ron, were you done adding your 2 cents?
Yes, I basically agree with what Tom said. I would keep it the way it is.
Okay. All right, so I'm next, and I agree with Tom and Ron that because it's it's on an elected position, it's a professional position. I wouldn't want to limit who we can pick, because if the city manager of Montreal, Quebec, Canada, who I don't know who that is or how they're doing, but if they did a fantastic job in a huge city like that and they wanted to move to Waterville and be our city manager and they were qualified and would do a good job, I wouldn't want to limit them. So I don't think that I'd be in favor of this motion. Hillary.
Yeah, I was shaking my head earlier, but Julian, you're right. So while the charter doesn't say you have to be a US citizen, you have to be a registered voter to run for mayor, and therefore you have to be a citizen in order to be a registered voter here in Waterville. And it looks like it's the same for the city council. So I think that's what you were getting at.
Yes.
While the charter doesn't specify US citizen, you can't be a registered voter if you're not a US citizen.
Right.
So I was wrong. It's not written, but you're right. It's not an elected position. I think I agree with Tom, and the remote chance of something like this happening is so remote that I think we should not restrict ourselves in that regard.
I found it, actually.
Yep.
I think I found it. It's entitled 30A, section 25, 26, 3A. And it said, in order to hold a municipal office, a person must be a resident of the state, at least 18 years of age, and a citizen of the United States.
See, I do listen to you, Patty.
But Patty, that would be an elected office. Is that correct?
No, it's any municipal office or town official.
So it would restrict then.
It appears to, yes, but I could certainly get clarification from Bill Lee, but that's what it appears.
So to point of clarification, Patty's actually saying there's already language there that restricts a non-citizen being manager. Okay.
That's what it looks like. I'm not an attorney, though.
No.
Yeah,
So
I would say we
So I
have
will withdraw my motion of debate, and we will have Patty investigate, because it might have been a moot point that I brought up, but obviously there was some concern at one point, or reasons why you had to be a citizen for that, if it is state statute for that. So we'll have Patty investigate. Thank you, Patty.
Okay, just for completion's sake, Samantha, did you have anything you wanted to say on that?
You skipped me, man. Come on.
Oh, did I? Sorry, Rianne. Sorry.
No, I got nothing to say. But you skipped me.
Really? After all that? Oh, man.
No, please, if I miss anybody, definitely correct me. How about you, Samantha?
No, we can talk about it later. Maybe that's just something we can add into the qualifications language, referencing that state statute.
All right.
Thank you for catching that, Patty.
Ludi, anything to add?
Nope.
All right, Phil, anything to add?
I have a 2-page document I need to read here, but for the sake of moving forward, I will follow Rianne lead and I just have nothing to say.
Okay, perfect. All right. All right, so we only have a couple minutes left. I think what I'll do is I have a motion, a clerical motion, which I think will elicit very, very little discussion, and then we can move to adjourn. But if you look on section 1 of Article 3, the very first sentence where it says the city manager shall be chosen as provided in Article 5, Section 9. When I first read that, I just read right by it. But then I went and actually looked at Article 5, Section 9, and it has literally absolutely nothing to do with how the city manager is appointed. And I think it's basically probably just an old reference that didn't get changed when other section or article and section numbers did get changed. So what Article 5, Section 9 says is that it's titled Public Official Liability Insurance. The city shall maintain a public official liability insurance policy or similar product that protects the city from internal theft by employees and elected and appointed officials. So to me, that has nothing to do with the city manager, and that to me means that it's an incorrect reference. I do think that what it's supposed to reference is Article 4, Section 7D. So Article 4 is the city council article, and Section 7D of that article says that Section 7 is the powers of the city council. Section 7D specifically says consider a recommendation from the search committee and approve by a majority vote of the city councils present appointment of a city manager and a city solicitor in the contract specifying the terms of employments. If necessary, remove the city manager and city solicitor in accord with provisions set forth in this chapter. So my motion is this, that we change that reference in the first section, the first sentence of Section 1, Article 3, to read that the city manager shall be chosen as provided in Article 4, Section 7D. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so we'll move to just one round of really lightning discussion. Kathy, any discussion?
Agree.
All right, Julian, any discussion?
Agree.
All right, Tom, any discussion?
I agree.
All right, Ron, discussion?
I do agree.
All right, Hillary, discussion?
Agree.
Rianne?
Yeah.
All right, Samantha, any discussion?
Nope.
Ludi, any discussion?
Nope, I agree.
Phil, any discussion?
So did we look in the city charter and make sure that there's not another section of the city charter that could be referenced there as well? I don't know if you did, maybe if you did, then probably, because there could be another section that is relevant that it should be pointing to, and we're going to be changing it. Well, we have to vote on it. We have to vote on this twice, right?
Yeah, we got to vote on it first real quick. I did look.
Yeah, sorry.
Go
I
ahead,
just want to
Rianne.
say, Phil, if it was a typo where they just left off the I, so it was supposed to be Article 4, it doesn't make sense to be in Section 9 of Article 4. And then Article 6, it really doesn't make any sense because Article 6 is the Code of Ethics, and half of that has been changed anyway. So I think it is, in what James said, I think it is an old reference, and it does belong in Article 4, Section 7.
Yeah, and Phil, just a point of clarification, I did look through Article 4, and because it is up to the city council to appoint the city manager, any reference in the charter to how the city manager is appointed would have to be in Article 4, and the only reference is under the powers section, Section 7 of the city council article, and that is the only place that it talks about how a city manager is appointed by a majority vote of the city councilors present.
Okay, I agree as amended.
All right, so real quick vote. If you're in favor, say yes. If you are opposed, say no. Kathy?
Yes.
Julian?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
James is a yes. Hillary?
Yes.
Rianne,
Yes.
Samantha,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
Phil.
Oh, yes.
All right, thank you. So the motion passes 10 to nothing. It is approved.
James,
So at this point,
James?
yep.
Hillary has her hand up.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry, Hillary,
I
hand
didn't
up.
see her hand. Oh, on there. Okay.
So I just wanted to point out, in these really nifty features of Zoom, we also have yes and no options. I don't know if that would save time moving forward.
It has to be by roll call because
Got it.
it's via Zoom.
Got it. Okay, just checking.
Yep.
James?
Yes, Julian.
So just a quick thought. I know we might want to have some consideration about time. Are we on schedule? Are we going to wrap up? What are we looking at? Because I know there's the process of, we haven't even got to the final package. We've done a lot of good housekeeping work, a lot of stuff Patty suggested, which and is really going to clean our charter up. And I know Rian's worked on that too. But, we have to remember this then has to go to Bill Lee to hash over, and then there's going to be sendbacks, and then it has to go to the council. We want to make sure we hit the November election being as it'll be a high turnout. So maybe some timetable or thought just so we don't miss the boat at some point, because I know we're really, really debating and going over line by line, which is a good thing, but we also got to deliver on time, I think, as well. So
Yeah, no,
Before we jump into line by line, I don't want Kathy's second motion to get lost here. And I know she had a second motion.
Yeah.
And so I think, here we are a minute before 8. And so Kathy, I don't know if you just want to hold your motion and make it next meeting, or if you want to make the motion and then hold it. But I want to make sure you're not getting lost here in what's going on.
No, that's fine for tonight, Rian, but I just wanted to say, along with Julian, we still have 6 points to discuss what the public brought forth, so we can't lose sight of that either. That was the only thing I was going to say.
Yeah, and so basically what I'll say is the bulk of our time in terms of our meeting and our votes, I think, are going to be taken up by Article 2, which we've done, Article 3 and Article 4. That's the mayor, the city manager, and the city council. I do anticipate a motion for when we get to Article 8, which is the school board administration of schools. I know that there was at least one suggestion put forth by the school board. There was a couple ideas when we covered elections, as well as the recall referendum initiative article. But I think once we get past Article 4, it's gonna go pretty quickly. And I'm definitely, even though I agreed that we should continue meeting just every other week, I also would be in agreement that once we get past Article 4, that if it takes us a while to get through that one, to revisit where we're at and look at our progress, because just personally speaking, I certainly don't want to be meeting for a second longer than we need to. But again, I think that most of our time is going to be taken up on these very initial articles. But we'll see where we're at once we get by Article 4, and then kind of revisit if we need to try to speed things up.
Yeah. It's just more for thought in the background, because I don't know how long Bill Lee will take to review it, and then kicking it back, that could be a whole nother can of worms, and then resending it, and then it comes back again. So I just want to make sure that we're not too far behind. I think we've done a lot more work and put way more effort than previous charter commissions from what I've seen or from what I've heard from them, but maybe it just feels that way. Thank you.
So then we know the language of the stuff that we've adopted. Is there anything preventing Patty from sending what we've already adopted to Bill ahead of time?
It's a good idea, I think.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I don't think there's anything prohibiting us from doing that, and that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think it's a very good idea, because then we're not going to be waiting for him to review a whole document,
So it sounds like basically we're done Articles 1 and 2, right? We're still on the city manager's article, which sounds like we may finish at the next meeting. So I
Yep.
can certainly work with Rian to get the language, make sure that we've got a mocked up version of each of those articles, and we could send them to Bill for review, certainly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I have
and-
a document that's tracking every verified change onto the charter.
Yeah.
So it's all in one document.
Yeah,
I'll
I
send it
definitely
along.
think, Bill, having that ahead of time is going to speed things up. We won't be waiting on anyone else other than ourselves.
Yep, and I think most of the changes have been, relatively benign. So as long as he doesn't see any conflict with any, state statute or whatever, I think, I don't see any major issues with the review from Bill. So yeah, sooner rather than later is fine with me.
Yeah, that definitely works for me to get the language to Bill sort of as we progress, and then that way we're not waiting for him to review an entire document when we get that done.
Sure.
This has been good discussion. Well, I wish everyone to stay safe and happy at home and have a good few weeks before we meet again. Thank you.
All right, Julian, is that a motion to adjourn that I hear?
That is a motion to adjourn.
My
Has her
hand-
hand up.
Hillary's hands up.
I'm sorry.
No, no problem.
I wanted to follow up because I didn't want anyone to think that our subcommittee didn't do what we'd been tasked to do. So technically we may be done with Article 2, but at our last Charter Commission meeting, our subcommittee had been tasked to look at the powers of the mayor in particular within a crisis or emergency situation. And I just wanted to update everyone. It's not that we shirked that task, but we had a discussion within our subcommittee as we work with other towns and we look at what other towns are doing. And we mentioned that there are some other towns or cities who have such provisions in their charters. Sometimes what we do might mean reaching out to them and having discussions. Given that we're in the midst of a pandemic, it seemed like the timing wasn't right. And what our subcommittee had suggested, and I should give credit really to Kathy, she had said, maybe let's get through a little bit of where we are with the pandemic so that we give everyone a little bit of breathing room, and then we can come back to it and then ask them. But we wanted to make clear anything that we recommend now has no immediate impact to what's going on right now within our city. So even if we made recommendations and we pass them right now, this is something that still has to go to voters. So I don't want anyone to think that our subcommittee didn't think it was important or that it needed to be addressed. We do. We just thought since we have to look at other cities and work with other cities, it just seemed considerate to give everyone some breathing room. And then they might actually have some really important things to say about why it was good, why it wasn't good, what they wished they could have had written that would have given them more power or not to handle this particular situation. So I wanted to be clear. It's not that we forgot, but if everyone's okay with tabling that for a little bit, we thought it seemed like the right thing to do.
I agree. Thank you, Hillary. Yeah, I think if we let some time go by and sort of pick this back up when we've gone through most of the other articles, I think that's totally appropriate. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, sorry.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes, Phil's motion to adjourn. I think there was a second in there somewhere.
Second.
All right, so Kathy,
Yes.
Julian,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes, and good night.
James is a yes, Hillary,
Yes.
Rian,
Oh yeah, I'm good.
Samantha,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
Phil.
Yes.
All right, good night, everyone.
Night.
Night.
Bye.
Good night, guys.